Which one is faster, a controller or a racing wheel? The wheel. The wheel is faster. However, what I wanted to know is how much faster a sim racing wheel is compared to a controller. In order to test this, I decided to do a lap with the controller and a lap with the wheel on the same track and in the same car. In order to expand upon these results, I did this 3 times. Once on a short track, once on a medium track, and once on a longer track. At the end of this test, I did a 5-lap race on the same track with both a controller and a wheel in order to compare those results as well. Before we get into it, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, which is absolutely amazing, so thank you very much to those who have already subscribed, and I'm planning to do a more special video for that soon. The first track for this test was the Highlands Short layout. This is a very quick track that's walled in on both sides and it requires a lot of precision. The bumpy curbs and cobblestone limit your car selection around here, as you can't have anything too low or too fast. For this track, I selected the Alfa Romeo 155 DTM. This car is extremely well-rounded with a balanced power-to-weight ratio, very strong stability and predictability, and good handling. First, I'm going to show the lap with the controller. Now obviously, I've played racing games with a controller before. In fact, probably the majority of my virtual racing career has been done on the sticks. Thank God I don't use a controller anymore. To anyone out there who still uses one, I have a lot of respect for you. With a controller, you lose a lot of sensitivity in the steering, and it's much harder to be precise and make small adjustments on the track. This is what I struggled with for most of this lap. This track is very narrow in some places and there's very few straights, so there's almost a constant need for these small adjustments. One small touch of the joystick can really screw up your lap, and the more assists you turn off while using the controller, the harder it is to drive. If I'm being totally honest, I probably did like 20 laps on a controller before this one, and each time I would hit a wall or completely crash out. I definitely could have gone a bit faster on this lap, but after 20 laps of misery, I was completely satisfied with just completing the lap without crashing. Now back on track with the Alpha, but this time using a racing wheel, and boy do I take this thing for granted. It literally feels like 10 times easier to drive with a wheel. The biggest problem I had with the controller was instantly neutralized, and with the wheel I could make super tiny adjustments on track. These adjustments might be as simple as being a foot closer to a wall before a corner, or an inch closer to an apex, but throughout the course of an entire lap, these small details add up. The wheel gives me so much more control over these tiny things, not to mention a much wider steering radius in general. After driving on the controller, the wheel feels like it fell from heaven. This was only the 3rd lap I did with the wheel. I was instantly able to drive confidently and put in a pretty good lap. Okay, second test now. For this we're using the Tatuus? I don't really know. Tatuus FA01, an open-wheel car designed for the Formula Abarth and Formula Master China series. It's incredibly easy to drive and super forgiving, so we're taking it around Silverstone. Alright, we'll start with the controller lap. Silverstone is much more open, so using a controller already feels much better than the enclosed city track with the Alfa Romeo. Obviously, all the points from those laps still stand, so the controller remains more difficult to use in regards to small adjustments. Honestly, this lap feels so much better than the last one. Silverstone is so much wider and smoother, so it's a million times easier to put in a solid lap without a mistake. What's frustrating on this lap is that I've lapped around Silverstone like 50,000 times, so I know the line and the braking points by heart, and when you nail a good lap, it's one of the smoothest tracks out there. However, with the controller, it's literally impossible to drive smoothly. Every corner is like a series of 3 or 5 jerks of the steering wheel, as opposed to one smooth, sweeping motion. It's so weird to know the perfect line through a corner and not be able to replicate it perfectly. Anyway, I'm going to speed up the rest of the lap so we can see the ending time for the controller at Silverstone. Alright, back on track at Silverstone now, and this time using the racing wheel. Again, the difference is night and day, and again, Silverstone feels so much more stable. However, I think the biggest difference I noticed around Silverstone was actually the pedals. On the last track, everything was pretty much flat out brake, and nothing more. However, Silverstone requires much more diligence on the throttle, and there were a lot of corners that must be taken cautiously. When driving with a controller, I'm able to modulate the throttle and accelerate very deliberately, but only to a certain extent. With the wheel, I have so much more control over the throttle, which obviously helps my overall lap time. I'm able to feather the throttle, keep more pressure through a corner, and accelerate more efficiently. In general, the more I'm driving with the controller, the more thankful I am for the wheel. On that last lap with the controller, I probably did between 5 and 10 laps before I got a good one in, and this is literally the only lap I did with the wheel. Obviously, I use the wheel all the time, so I'm more used to it, but the difference in confidence when driving the wheel is crazy. I feel so much more in control of the car, and I can aim for the tiniest margins of the track without much hesitation. Again, I'm going to speed up the rest of this lap. Lastly, we have the Porsche 919 Hybrid, an LMP1 car with insane speed, grip, and stability. Given how fast this car is, I definitely want to use it for the longer circuit, so we've taken it to Spa. Here on track now, and again, starting with the controller lap. You guys are lucky you're seeing this because it took me a million laps to get a good one. I was snapping back and forth at Eau Rouge and crashing at Raidillon, understeering off the track, not braking enough, etc. The controller around here is a major challenge, so again, respect to everyone out there playing these games on a controller. I absolutely hated it. It makes sense that Spa is the hardest track for a controller because, well, it's the hardest track so far. The hardest part about using a controller on this track is simply corner entry. Spa is all about corner entry in my opinion because there aren't many alternate lines you can take efficiently through each corner. There's pretty much only one good racing line here. This is especially hard on a controller because again, steering is so rigid and harsh that a perfect line through each corner is really difficult to achieve. Again, it's hard to make small adjustments that allow you to enter or exit a corner well. These really add up, and I was cringing through each corner when the steering input from the controller looked like the driver had peg legs for arms and was just jamming the wheel left and right as hard as he could. The car itself is insane though. It's completely planted through each corner, and there's not even a hint of instability. It's also super smooth, and the only way it feels too understeery is if I make a major mistake. The 919 and Spa go hand in hand. It's like it was designed specifically for this track. Anyway, speeding up a lap now, and we'll take a look at the controller time. Alright, back at Spa with the wheel now, and man, switching from controller to wheel never gets old. The difference is absolutely insane. I'm immediately so much more confident, and this is only my second lap with the wheel. Everything feels so much more precise. I've pretty much made all the points I can about this, so I'm going to summarize the general feel of the difference between a controller and a wheel. For starters, with a wheel you can actually feel the track. Bumps and curbs affect your car, and with a controller you can't really understand the full effect of them. Additionally, the force feedback in the wheel through corners is essential to faster laps, as it gives you more of an indication whether to use more throttle, brake, lift, or change your steering. The wheel also gives you more precision when entering and exiting the corners. When entering a corner, it's easier to use the entire width of the track without risking a dip of your tires into the grass or gravel. When turning in or mid-corner, it's easier to use the curbs with the wheel because it offers more precision. And when exiting the corners, it's easier to aim for an outside exit, using the curb and looking for that full track extension, something that is far more challenging on a controller. Lastly, the wheel goes hand in hand with pedals, and both throttle and brake control are 10 times easier with actual pedals to control it. It gives you much more confidence to feather the throttle around a corner with pedals as it does with triggers on your controller. Obviously, the wheel is better for driving and is a nicer piece of equipment, so it's easier to use. I definitely want to reiterate that controller players deserve my respect because I don't ever want to go back to it ever again. So here's all the lap times for each track. We can see a pretty big difference on the times here, and as I've stated before, the difference in feeling is absolutely massive. However, lap times isn't all that I wanted to test out. I wanted to do a race with each as well. Back at the Highlands short layout, and we're in the Lotus Evora GTC. Here we are on the grid, 5 red lights are on, and we are racing on the Highlands short layout. We're only doing 5 laps this race, starting at the very back of the field, 15th out of 15 cars, and we're going to see how high up the order we can get using the controller. Obviously, after this, we're going to compare it to the wheel and see the difference in places. Absolutely decimating that Lotus 211 right there. Definitely a big mistake for me. Kind of misjudged the braking right there. So sorry to that Lotus driver. But both these races, both the controller and the wheel races, are going to be on the same exact difficulty in the same car, starting from the same position, same amount of laps, everything. So it should be as equal as I can possibly get it. Obviously, the AI are going to be a little bit different from race to race, but you can't really control that. So anyway, the controller has been not that great so far. I'm definitely struggling. Obviously, we had that huge contact with that Lotus. Finally passing this Maserati. Looks like maybe a little bit even more contact with that Lotus on the right into turn 1 on lap 2 now. Luckily, we didn't take this guy out of the race as well. That was a pretty bad incident on lap 1 from us. But like I was saying, the controller is definitely pretty difficult. It looks like barely squeezing past him. I think we do make contact, and looking in the rear view right now, I think we might have taken that Lotus out of the race as well. So we might be looking at a black flag pretty soon if we keep hitting everyone. On lap 3 now, pretty much still just wrestling with the car. It's very difficult for me to drive the car the way I want to, just because the steering is so alien to me as opposed to using a wheel. But that Lotus gets in front now, skipping ahead another lap on lap 4. Gonna be behind this Porsche now in the slipstream. Hopefully we can get him on this lap. Obviously we're not really making as much progress as I wanted to see, but in the slipstream now is going to go up the inside, which is going to turn to the outside for this corner. So we're going to get past him before the corner before we get to a Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Cops Corner incident. Up the inside of this Lotus yet again. Another Lotus passed, and behind this Maserati now. On the final lap of the race, last lap, desperation send up the inside. A lot of contact with the Maserati, contact with the curbs, contact with the wall, more contact with the Maserati, and just a terrible display of racing. Even more contact as we go through this kind of twisty left-right little bit of this track right here, but definitely very bad racing. Up the inside, that was a little bit of a redemption right there. And final corner now behind this BMW. Hopefully we can get him on the main straight. Unfortunately, making a little bit of contact with the rear of this BMW right here, and that's gonna be that for this race. Alright, back on track now. The 5 red lights are on, and we are racing with a racing wheel. This is going to feel so much better than driving with the controller. Already threading the needle between these two cars here. A lot more control with the wheel. It's crazy. If I had that situation with the controller, they were probably going to both get punted into the wall, but a lot of places already made up into the first couple of corners. Up the inside of that Lotus right there, up the inside of that Maserati, and now already into 9th position out of 15, so definitely a much better start than we had with the controller. Up the inside of this BMW right there, so much more control. It's absolutely night and day, the difference between the controller and the wheel. It's the pedals, it's the steering, it's those little small adjustments are way easier to make. It's a lot of different factors, but yeah, definitely making a lot more progress. And still having a fight with this Lotus to our left. Hopefully we can get him up into this double right-hander. We'll see if we can go for kind of a dive bomb right here. Looks like this is going to be the corner where we win that little fight with that Lotus behind. Already up into 7th position and only on lap number 2. Up the inside now of this yellow Lotus in front, and yet again another Lotus lay ahead of that one. So behind a Lotus 211 now. Hopefully we can get him right here. It looks like we're going to go around the outside, kind of drifting out to the wider line. He's going to stick to the inside line. We're going to go for a switchback. His line is compromised. He's on the inside, and we can have that kind of up and under right there, and that was a pretty nice move, if I'm going to be honest. That was a pretty satisfying one to pull off. Definitely would not be able to do that with a controller. A little bit of contact with that Porsche on the left right there. Kind of unfortunate, but obviously it's a small track, pretty skinny, so contact is kind of inevitable. You know, it's still not the best racing on my end, but yeah, I'll just chalk it up to that. A little bit more contact with that yellow Lotus up in front, and should be able to get him on this straight. Hopefully we can. Looks like he's going to pull away a little bit. We're in the slipstream of this Maserati in front, and that Porsche is going to live to fight another couple of corners. But I think right here, we're going to go for a dive bomb, and hopefully this is going to be enough to get him. And it looks like it's not enough. He's still putting up a pretty good fight. A little bit of contact as he hits the wall, kind of bounces back into us, and this should be the nail in the coffin for that guy. Behind the Maserati now, in third place. We're on the bottom step of the podium right now on lap 4 of lap 5, and we should definitely be able to go for a second place finish. Going to be a little bit more patient with this Maserati in front. Obviously, we don't really have, there's no reason to rush and overtake, but we're going to go up the inside right there. Pretty simple one, and the Maserati is behind us. So 1 lap to go in pretty much clean air the rest of the race. Looks like first place is a little bit too far away. You can't really even see him on the little mini-map on the bottom left. So first place is unfortunately too far away. We're going to settle for second, but that's definitely a big improvement from the controller. It felt so much better to drive. A lot more control, a lot easier. So here's the overall results from the race. Obviously, I placed higher with the wheel, and I had a faster lap time compared to my race with the controller. And during the race with the wheel, I had much more control over my car. Here's the lap times again as well, in case you wanted to take a second look. But that's going to do it for today. Again, thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. It's absolutely insane to me, and I really appreciate everyone that watches my channel. It's so cool to see all the support. If you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like down below, and feel free to comment here or in my Discord, which is linked in the description. So, if you made it this far, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.